The story unfolding in Burkina Faso today is nothing short of historic, and it carries with it a weight that can be felt far beyond the dusty gold fields of West Africa. Imagine for a moment a nation that for decades watched its wealth dug up, carried away, and sold to enrich foreign corporations while its people remained in poverty. For generations, the glitter of gold in Burkina Faso's soil was a reminder not of prosperity, but of exploitation. Now that narrative is shifting, and at the heart of this transformation is a leader who has dared to do what many before him would not. Captain Ibrahim Traoré. His decision to reclaim the gold mines has sent shockwaves across the globe, and you can almost feel the tremor in the nervous boardrooms of Paris, London, and Washington. What makes this moment so powerful is that it's more than just economics. Yes, we are talking about billions of dollars in resources suddenly brought under national control. But what's happening is deeply symbolic. It's about dignity. It's about a people finally saying no more. For too long, contracts were signed in air-conditioned hotels that favored multinational corporations. While entire villages near the mines struggled for clean water and basic schools, the profits were exported, the people left with dust. This gold coup, as many are calling it, is an act of defiance against that injustice. It is Burkina Faso declaring that its wealth will no longer be a playground for outsiders. Traoré'S decision did not come without risk. Everyone knew the moment his government seized control of the mines, powerful forces would be angered. Investors panicked overnight, gold prices fluctuated, and Western leaders expressed concern. But in Ouagadougou, the mood was entirely different. People celebrated. Streets buzzed with conversations about sovereignty and self-reliance. Mothers selling food at the market said they finally believed their children might, and one day benefit from the resources beneath their feet. Farmers in the countryside spoke of pride, knowing that the gold dug from their soil would now build schools and hospitals instead of filling foreign bank accounts. It's almost impossible not to feel the weight of history here. Africa has always been rich in resources, yet its people have often been denied the benefits of that richness. From colonialism to modern-day neocolonialism, the story has been painfully familiar. Outsiders taking what they wanted, while locals were told to be grateful for scraps. Traoré's move flips that script entirely. He has essentially said, our resources are not charity for outsiders. They are the inheritance of our children. And that kind of language resonates not only in Burkina Faso, but across the entire continent, of course. Critics are quick to point out the dangers. They warn of international sanctions, of a loss of foreign investment, of isolation. They question whether Burkina Faso has the infrastructure, the expertise, or the capital to manage these mines on its own. And those concerns aren't entirely baseless. Running a gold industry is complex, and the challenges will be immense. But here's the thing. Burkina Faso has already lived through the so-called benefits of foreign domination. The schools still weren't built. The hospitals still weren't supplied. The jobs still weren't plentiful. So really, what is there to lose? At least now the nation has a chance to fail or succeed on its own terms, and that chance is worth everything. Traoré himself has become something of a symbol. Young, dark-skinned, muscular, and fiercely determined. He embodies a generation of Africans who refuse to bow their heads anymore. There's an energy about him that inspires people, not just because of his speeches, but because he acts. He's not simply talking about sovereignty, he's enforcing it. And while his critics in the West may paint him as reckless or authoritarian, for many Africans, he looks like the kind of leader they've been waiting for. A leader willing to put his people's future above the profits of foreign powers. This gold coup also speaks to a broader trend in Africa. Burkina Faso is not alone in its frustration with the West. Across the Sahel, countries are turning away from old alliances and looking for new partners or relying on themselves. Mali, Niger, and others are watching closely, perhaps even considering similar moves. Feels like the start of something bigger, a ripple effect that could change the very balance of global power. When one country shows that it is possible to stand up and survive, others gain the courage to follow. For the ordinary Burkina citizen, the immediate impact is not piles of gold bars sitting in their homes. Change will take time. they have right now is something perhaps even more valuable than gold: hope. Hope that the wealth of their land will no longer vanish into foreign vaults. Hope that when their children walk into a classroom, the chalk on the board, the roof over their heads, and the desks they sit at will be paid for with the sweat and soil of their own nation. Hope that dignity, long denied, is finally within reach. When you step back and really think about it, this is more than an economic decision. It's a cultural awakening, a political gamble, and a social revolution all rolled into one. The West sees gold as a commodity. Burkina Faso now sees it as a symbol of freedom. That's the difference. And it's that difference that makes this moment so electric, so filled with possibility. Whether this bold move will succeed in the long run remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: Ibrahim Traoré has ensured that Burkina Faso's story will no longer be written by others. It will be written by Burkinab hands, in Burkinab voices, on Burkinab soil. And that, perhaps, is the greatest treasure of all. Burkina Faso's gold coup is more than just an economic shift. It feels like the heartbeat of a nation finally deciding to rise and speak for itself. For so long, gold was pulled from the soil of this land, glittering in world markets, filling the treasuries of corporations and foreign governments, but leaving behind little more than dust for the very people who live closest to it. This story is not only about minerals, it is about dignity, about history, and about the courage to break free from chains that for decades seemed unshakable. When the government of Burkina Faso made the bold move to reclaim control over its gold mines, it sent a wave of emotion through the streets. For ordinary people, this was not just a political or financial decision, it was liberation. Imagine the pride of a farmer, a teacher, or a young student hearing that their country would no longer be exploited, that the wealth hidden under their feet now belongs to them. There is a human texture to this event, a sense of relief, almost like taking a long breath after years of suffocation. The act of seizing back the mines was not done in silence. It rattled the world. It made investors nervous. It made foreign powers angry. But for the people of Burkina Faso, it felt like justice finally being served. For decades, African countries have been treated as suppliers of raw resources, while others far away enjoyed the luxuries born from African soil. The gold of Burkina Faso traveled across oceans, becoming jewelry, investments, symbols of wealth in other lands, while in its homeland, poverty persisted. This injustice created a wound that many carried quietly, until now. The gold coup became a symbol of sovereignty because it represents more than material wealth. Sovereignty is about standing tall, about reclaiming control over one's future, about refusing to live under someone else's shadow. Burkina Faso said, "This gold is ours." It was also saying, "Our destiny is ours." It is an act of self-respect, an emotional declaration that the country will no longer bow to those who saw it as a resource hub rather than a sovereign nation. This moment touched not just the people of Burkina Faso, but also resonated across Africa and even among the diaspora. There was pride in seeing a young African nation push back against centuries of exploitation, a reminder that sovereignty is not given, it is taken, often at great cost. What makes this story even more powerful is the way it humanizes the idea of sovereignty. It is not an abstract concept, it is the food on a family's table. It is schools being built with national wealth. It is hospitals being equipped with resources that once left the country. It is young people growing up knowing their country values its own riches enough to keep them. It is mothers and fathers believing their children may have a better life because the nation dared to protect what is rightfully theirs. Every act of sovereignty has an emotional core, and in Burkina Faso's case, was about finally deciding to put people before profit, dignity before dependence. Of course, such a decision does not come without struggle, the panic it caused. In international markets revealed how deeply the world still expects African resources to remain under foreign control. But that panic also shows the power of what Burkina Faso has done. When a single country can shake the global order with one decision, that is true sovereignty in action. It is like a loud echo that cannot be ignored, reverberating across borders. whispering to other nations that they too can rise, they too can reclaim, they too can breathe freely. To call this a gold coup almost simplifies it. It is not only about gold, it is about identity. It is about rewriting the story of a nation once thought powerless in the face of global giants. Now, there is a new narrative being written by the hands of Burkina themselves, one where their sovereignty shines brighter than the very gold hidden beneath their soil. It is emotional because it touches the core of human desire, the need to be free, to live with dignity, to see the fruits of one's land serve one's people. Ibrahim. Traoré'S defiance against Western control is not just the story of a young leader making bold decisions, it is the story of a man carrying the weight of his nation's dignity on his shoulders. To many in the West, his choices may look reckless, radical, or even dangerous. But to the people of Burkina Faso, his stance feels like the first time in a long time that someone has dared to speak their truth without fear. When Traoré stands up and challenges Western influence, he is not simply rejecting political pressure. He is giving a voice to millions who have lived under the shadow of outside control for generations. His defiance is emotional because it is rooted in the deep pain of exploitation. For decades, Burkina Faso, like much of Africa, was treated as a land to be used, its wealth extracted, its people left behind. The gold in its soil, the cotton in its fields, the labor of its people, all too often benefited others across oceans rather than those who tilled the land and called it home. Western powers wrapped this exploitation in the language of aid and partnership. But beneath it was control, subtle and unyielding. Traoré looked at this system and simply said no. He may be young, but his defiance carries the weight of centuries of unspoken frustration, and that makes it powerful. There is something profoundly human about the way he approaches this struggle. He does not posture as a polished diplomat, carefully choosing words to appease. Instead, he speaks plainly, directly, sometimes with fire in his tone, as though he is channeling the voices of farmers, soldiers, mothers, and youth who have long waited for someone to stand for them. In those moments, you feel the gap between polished Western boardrooms and the dusty streets of Ouagadougou, where ordinary people see their leader as one of them, a man unafraid to take on giants. His defiance is also deeply personal. Traoré was once just a soldier, a bodybuilder, a young man of strength and conviction. And now he finds himself at the helm of a nation that refuses to kneel. His muscular frame and commanding presence carry a symbolic weight, almost as if his physical strength mirrors the strength of his convictions. When he challenges Western interference, he is also fighting the lingering image that African nations must always be dependent, always be followers, never leaders in their own right. It is emotional to watch because it flips the script so drastically. What Traoré does is not easy. Pressure he faces is immense. Western powers are not used to being told no, especially by a young African leader they once thought could be swayed or controlled. His defiance comes with risks, sanctions, isolation, economic retaliation, but to him, freedom is worth more than fear. And this is where his story becomes relatable to people everywhere, who has not, at some point, felt the weight of someone else's control, the suffocation of living under someone else's rules. Traoré's defiance taps into that universal yearning for self-determination, the simple but powerful desire to decide one's own path. For the people of Burkina Faso, his stance is not abstract politics. It is food security, it is education, it is sovereignty over their gold, their cotton, their future. Each word of defiance he speaks feels like a promise that their sacrifices will not continue to be in vain. And this is why emotions run so high around his leadership. There is pride, of course, but also fear and hope tangled together, because to stand against the West is to step into a storm. Yet even in that storm, there is a calm strength in the way he carries himself, as though he knows the eyes of his people are upon him, and he cannot afford to bend. Watching Traoré is like witnessing a living contradiction to the narrative long fed to the world that African leaders must choose obedience or chaos. He is carving out a third path, one where defiance is not reckless but necessary. It's not destruction but reconstruction. not weakness, but a declaration of strength. And this makes his story resonate far beyond Burkina Faso. Across Africa, and even among the diaspora, people see in him a mirror of their own struggles, their own dreams of liberation. In his defiance, they see a reminder that sovereignty is not a luxury, it is a right. It is about owning your land, your wealth, your future. It is about no longer letting outsiders dictate what your nation can and cannot be. Ibrahim Traoré'S. Defiance against Western control, at its heart, is a story of courage. It is the kind of courage that rises when someone is tired of bowing, tired of being told their place, tired of seeing their people suffer while others thrive off their backs. It is a story that feels alive, pulsing with emotion, heavy with history, and full of hope. Gold transforming into a weapon of independence is not just a poetic idea. It is a lived reality in today's Africa. For generations, gold has been stripped from the soil of nations like Burkina Faso, shipped overseas, and turned into profit for foreign corporations, while the people who lived on that land remained trapped in poverty. That bitter contradiction created an open wound, one that carried both anger and despair. Now something different is happening. For the first time in decades, gold is being claimed not as a shiny treasure to enrich outsiders, but as a tool of freedom and strength for those who have suffered the most. It feels like watching a symbol of exploitation suddenly shift into a symbol of dignity. And that transformation alone speaks volumes about resilience and hope. When we hear the word independence, we often think of flags being raised, national anthems echoing across stadiums, or leaders declaring freedom from a podium. But real independence is much deeper than that. It is not about ceremony, it is about control. It is about who has the power to decide how resources are used and who benefits from them. In Burkina Faso, gold is at the center of that struggle. For years, the mines were like cages, swallowing up the nation's wealth and sending it far away. The workers dug under grueling conditions, only to watch the profits leave their homeland. There was a sense of helplessness, as if their own soil was betraying them. But by reclaiming those mines and turning gold into something that strengthens the nation rather than weakens it, Burkina Faso has written a new chapter in the book of freedom. It is not hard to imagine the emotions people must have felt when they heard the announcement that the government was taking control of the mines. For some, it must have been pure relief, like a heavy weight finally lifted. For others, perhaps cautious optimism, because promises have been made before and broken. But beneath all that, there must have been pride, the kind of pride that comes when you realize that the wealth beneath your feet finally belongs to you and your children. It is not about overnight riches. It is about dignity. It is about looking at the land with new eyes, not as something stolen or exploited, but as a partner in survival and progress. Gold as a weapon of independence also changes how the world sees Burkina Faso. Suddenly, this small West African nation is no longer just a place on the periphery of global politics. It is a country capable of reshaping narratives. The very thing that was once used to keep it dependent is now being turned into a shield, a source of defiance. That shift sends a loud message not only to the people of Burkina Faso, but to the entire continent. That sovereignty is not gifted, it is taken. That resources are not curses, they are blessings when claimed by the people they belong to. This message resonates far beyond Burkina Faso's borders, touches the hearts of many Africans who have seen their nations drained of wealth and left behind in poverty. There is also something deeply human about this story. At its core, it is about fairness. Every parent in Burkina Faso who works hard to feed their family understands the injustice of seeing billions in gold profits leave while schools, hospitals, and roads remain underfunded. The decision to use gold differently is not just politics, it is justice for those parents, for those children who deserve better futures. It is the kind of justice that feels personal, because it connects directly to daily struggles. Food on the table, clean water, safety, and opportunity. This is why the symbolism of gold turning into independence hits so hard. It is not an abstract concept. It is about life itself. And of course, the world is watching. Western corporations and governments, long used to controlling African gold, are uneasy. They see gold slipping from their grip and turning into a shield against their influence. This is why the term weapon feels so fitting. Burkina Faso has not launched missiles or waged wars, but by reclaiming control over its resources. It has challenged global powers in a way that is just as impactful. Gold has become a weapon that does not destroy, but instead protects. A weapon that empowers rather than devastates. It is almost poetic, using the very thing that once chained the nation as the very thing that now sets it free. There will, of course, be challenges. Managing gold is not simple. It requires transparency, discipline, vision to make sure that the profits truly benefit the people and not just a few at the top. But even acknowledging those challenges, the symbolism remains powerful. Every ounce of gold mined in Burkina Faso now carries a different weight. Not just economic value, but a moral weight. The weight of hope, pride, and self-determination. The story of gold turning into a weapon of independence is really the story of people refusing to remain silent in the face of exploitation. It is the story of reclaiming what was lost and giving new meaning to old wounds. It is about a small country telling the world, we are not weak, we are not dependent, we are not invisible. It is about resilience forged in hardship and hope carved from the depths of the earth. When you think about it that way, gold is no longer just a metal. It is a story, a lifeline, a declaration. And in Burkina Faso, it is the beginning of something far bigger than wealth. It is the rebirth of freedom.